Welcome to Equisamaras, As the Barn Turns. Something we've all been waiting for that, well, no one really asked for, but we all know we need. A podcast that dives into the inner workings of both the professional and amateur horse world, for horse people and anyone else to enjoy. If you're new to the podcast, firstly, welcome to the show. A few things to note: we hardly do any editing. What you see, what you hear, is what you get. Mostly because we're not a professionally backed entertainment stream. And truth be told, authenticity is more our style. Take it or leave it, there's nothing fake here. Just real people with real experiences and real education to share. At times, there will be creative verbiage used, but to be honest, I personally don't trust a horse person that doesn't swear from time to time. And I'm not interested in censoring our guests. Now, that's not to say there aren't horse people and equine professionals out there who do not use colorful words, and God love them. But if colorful words thrown in to amplify or intensify a point from time to time are not your cup of tea, well, then this just might not be the podcast for you. But for the rest of us, I think this is where I tell you to hit the subscribe button. So please go ahead and do that. And please know that all proceeds earned on this podcast go towards equine organizations that place education above all else. Organizations such as the United States Pony Club, EACPA College Preparatory Academy, and their partnering educational professional horse parks. So without further ado, mount up and enjoy the ride. So I'm here today with one of the leading experts, I would consider, in the breeding genre of the horse world. But I do want to start with, not many people attempt or really know to understand the full process of breeding. They understand how it happens, I think, mostly, but they don't really understand the entirety and the complexities of it. I am, however, going to start today with my own personal whiskey tango foxtrot story. And really what I'm going to say is we're going to start with the bad today and we're going to end with the good. So my whiskey tango foxtrot story happened, about 6 or 7 months ago. I was called out to help a woman who I was told was an elderly woman who needed to have a couple horses moved from one turnout space to another. And so I was like, well, yeah, I can help out. Sure, Monday, my only day off. Sure, I'll come out and help you. And so I drove into about an hour away down near Sacramento. And I got there, and the woman wasn't, she was older, but she was fully capable. And so I was like, what's happening here? So, we just need to move this mare and this mare over here. Okay. Well, I'm going to take this mare. And they kind of went through this whole story about how, well, they're a little bit feral and they're a little this and little that. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's why I'm here to help out. Okay, cool. So we had to go down this pathway, and it was very small pathway, and it was very windy down into this other area of her property, if you can imagine. And so I was like, all right. And there was another woman there who had kind of set this deal up as well and called me out to help. And I didn't know these people at all. Like, it was just a random call and me being like, well, I could use some brownie points in this world. So yeah, I'll go help you out. Right. There's my good deed for the year. Right. And so we wound down into this area, and there was you kind of got to this bottom area and you were locked in, if you will. So there was, on this side, it was a irrigation ditch full of water, right? So that was dangerous. And then there was just this pathway that went into this run. And I'm like, and as we're walking by down this, I'm like, I'm not feeling good about this. This is not good. There's something wrong here, right? Well, it turned out she wanted to do a live cover. Yep. She failed to mention that. Oh, yeah. And there was a stallion in there who then proceeded to bust through the aluminum panels, mind you, knock her over, almost knock me over. I mean, trying to get on this mare who's freaking out. So it was this terrible, terrible experience. And it was probably as close as I've ever gotten to, I would say, death. I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but I've ridden a lot of horses. I've jumped meter 50s, no big deal. And that is probably the most intense experience I've been in. And I was furious. I was absolutely furious. And so I think that, and then I'm thinking, like, this poor mare is like, what have you taken me to? Like, what is this? You horrible human. And I'm like, I'm a horrible human. I had no idea. So and I can look back on that and go, I have to take some accountability too. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I have to take some accountability because instead of getting there, everything, walking it and seeing everything before just grabbing the horse and walking and assuming it was like no big deal, I ended up in a really bad situation. So, I've always had my own personal feelings on live cover. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I think personally, there's better ways of doing things, and it's not my bang.
Yeah, but that's actually.
That's my personal take on it, and that was one experience I had that really really upset me, and really showed another example of where I think education is so important in this industry. At least letting people know what the results, positive or negative, are going to be in any given situation, and what you're really doing when you think you're doing something that you want to do.
Right.
What are those repercussions? And they are, long-standing. So that's my
right.
WTF story. But I'd like to go on. Yeah. Enough about me. So we're here with Megan Burtness, the founder, owner, and manager of Bridalwood Welsh, a premier breeding farm located in Paso Robles, California, who has for over 10 years been on the board of directors of the Welsh Pony and Cob Society of America. Megan is also a WPCSA, Welsh Pony Cob Society of America, Breeder Order of the Dragon recipient that was earned with 15 Legions of Merit, who also most recently was awarded her second Breeder of the Order of the Dragon 2024 with 10 awards of excellence. So you're a rock star. But I do kind of want to start with. I do want to start a little bit though with the Order of the Dragon, because I think in the horse world, we've all heard of dragon riding season, right? And I did have a client put a nice plaque above my office, or give me a plaque that I've put above my office that says Mother of Dragons. But I'm willing to bet those connotations are much different than what your award is. So can you tell us a little bit about that award and really what goes into it?
Yeah, so where the dragon part comes from is because there's a dragon on the Welsh flag. So that's where, since it's a breed from Wales, that's where the dragon part comes from. We joke that every Welsh pony is a little dragon. But what it is, WPCSA has annual awards, but they also have lifetime awards because almost everyone within the breed often is a breeder to some extent. It's kind of a social norm, which has a lot of pluses actually to it. But they want to recognize those who have been exemplary in doing so. And so they have an entire awards program where you have your Legions of Merit, which you can earn them as an individual, a sire, or a dam. You have your Awards of Excellence, which you can earn as an individual, a sire, or a dam, same thing. They actually now have the Order of the Griffin, which can only be earned by individuals. and then your Order of the Dragon, which both individual ponies, sires, dams, and then breeders can earn. And so there's 3 ways the breeders can earn it, with 15 Legions of Merit, 10 Awards of Excellence, or 4 Orders of the Dragon on different ponies. And I'm actually 1 Order of the Dragon shy, maybe 1.5 seasons, 1 season to 1.5 seasons shy of earning it the 3rd way now. So on 1 mare, I have 3 Orders of the Dragon with our senior stallion, Clanfair Signature, and then one of his daughters is really close to her individual Order of the Dragon as well.
That's incredible.
So,
I mean, those are some incredible feats, and I think really show your commitment to this breed, commitment to breeding, and really doing it in the right way. So that's cool. That's awesome. But can you?
Yeah, there's 2 other breeders that have earned it. Huh?
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh no, there's 2 other breeders that have earned it 3 ways. I would be the 3rd.
Wow, 3 for 3. That's pretty cool. What?
Yeah.
So let's go all the way back. Let's go back. I mean, what are you, like 22? Let's go back.
42.
Look at you. I was gonna give you that. I've known you for many, many years.
No. I figure I earned the wrinkles and the age.
You have no wrinkles, Megan.
Oh, few.
Let's go all the way back. Let's go back to your very beginnings. And, can you tell me about the first introduction you had to horses?
So my mother, when I was probably 2, up and decided she wanted to start taking riding lessons. And she found a barn and that had a trainer, and she got started, and that I was in the barn from the time I was 2 years old forward, and that trainer really didn't let kids start taking lessons until they were 5 or 6, but by the time I was coming 4, I'd been around for 2 years and was clearly ready. And so they let me start early. It was just kind of in my blood. Something about, from a very young age, outside of a horse spoke to the inside of me. And so I got started pretty young, honestly, so young I don't actually recall when I wasn't riding.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So then kind of a follow-up question to that is, can you tell me that moment or that period of time in which you discovered your, what I like to call your superpower, your ability to connect with them?
Yeah. So I don't remember how old I was, old enough to remember, in grade school at some point, and the trainer got in a Welsh pony that was a dragon. He was virtually unrideable at that point. He had been sent to her mostly as a place to dump him, and she didn't believe that there was such a thing as an unfixable situation or pony or horse in any capacity. So she set about fixing him, and it was a rocky road. It involved most of her older students, because he wasn't very big. He was actually a Section A, so he was only 22. And so it wasn't really something adults could ride a ton. And it just wasn't going well. And one day she decided to just swap things up and tossed me, and I was probably 6 or 7, tossed me on him, and
wow,
he was a saint. Yeah.
Really?
I was the first kid he didn't land on the ground. Yeah, it was fine. And I ended up showing him, oh gosh, for years. I think he took me almost into young teenagerhood.
Wow.
And so that, kind of funny enough, that was when I discovered I have a really good ability at talking something off a ledge.
Yeah, right?
Fake it till you make it. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a different time back then, You could break kids, it was okay.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, no, you just got punted into the deep end and it was fine.
Hope for the best.
And so, yeah, it was just, it was a really different time.
Yeah. That's a magical, that's that magical moment, I think, that so many of us have experienced and some of us are still chasing,
Yeah.
you know. There is this,
Right.
I think, connection that happens with certain horses or ponies and people. That's just, I think their souls just for some reason connect with that individual and not with
Connect.
anybody else. So yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your equine journey? Like how you got started? It sounded like your mom wanted to start riding, and so that kind of brought you there as a, well, I mean, she probably had to keep you alive, right, while she was riding, so you had to go with her at that time.
Yep, that was it exactly. It was either sit in the car or go play with the horses.
Right. That's awesome.
And so, yeah, those are your choices. Again, different time.
Time, yeah.
But yeah, no, I showed for I ended up showing for years. So the trainer that I was with, primarily she had saddlebreds, but she kind of moved into Arabians, with a primary background at that point in dressage. And but she had a whole pack of Welsh ponies to more or less keep all of us kids from ruining her well-trained Arabs. And it worked out really well for, yeah, worked out really well for me, because it was cheaper to go to Welsh shows and it was easy experience for everyone. And I got introduced to not only the Welsh breed and riding them, but the Welsh community. And I figured out at a very young age that that was the community I wanted to be a part of. It was, I mean, we joke we're family friendly fun, but if you show up, we're gonna make you work like family too.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I just fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the lack of politics. I fell in love with everyone helped everyone. I fell in love with you could ask advice from anyone standing there on the showgrounds, and it was readily given.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that
and
kind
it
of
was just, it was just,
I think that goes really into my next question, and that is, you know, what education was provided to you, and it sounds like the community that you were a part of really took you in and
yeah,
educated you from a young age, moving forward as to
yep,
not just how to ride, which is important, of course, but really what is riding? Riding is a communication, right? And so it's
yep.
a
It is a
communication with other
communication.
people
Yep.
and knowing
Yeah,
everything about that,
exactly. And it,
how you communicate.
right. And the thing about the whole Welsh breed is obviously it's a pony breed, so it does have a big focus on the youth.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing them along. We have a youth advisory council within on a national level. We, all those things. And so I got to experience that as a kid and then have grown through it and continued as an adult in that same world and program.
And now helping the youth coming up, so it's very full circle for you, which
Hmm.
is amazing. That's got to be such a
It
great
really
feeling.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So
really is. We have a lot of focus on that, and it's nice to watch.
can you tell me then a little bit about how you got into, you know, equine breeding? Like, what is your breeding background?
So the Welsh kind of social norm is almost everyone who's involved in the breed, at the very least, dabbles in breeding or becomes a breeder. It's kind of just a societal norm within the breed. When I got started in the Welsh, there was very little AI, there was very little ship semen. It was really you sent your mare to the stallion, you kind of, or you owned your own stallion. And because of logistics of having to send mares away, it really was easier to buy a colt and raise the stallion up your way and have your own stallion, breed your own mares. It was just, I mean, it was just what was done. It's still kind of what's done, though we have grown with the times. Again, different time. We do a lot more AI and we do a lot more ship semen now, but there's still that base culture of everyone partakes within the breeding of the breed, and it keeps the breed very diversified.
Interesting.
And it yeah, and so we haven't really followed in the footsteps of the larger breeds where they've become very focused on a select few of high dollar earners. Welsh ponies aren't high dollar earners. We don't have that built into our program. So it really comes down to you breed what you want. You breed what you makes you happy, makes you excited to get up and go out and work with your ponies. And it's really more of a family community as opposed to out to earn the dollar earner.
Right, right.
And so because of that, I kind of fell into that same role, and that's kind of it's made the breeders on the West Coast made it very easy to get involved with them. They're mostly based in the Sacramento area as far as a large conglomerate of it. Now, crazy enough, we're mostly based here on the Central Coast as far as California goes. And, I bought, I think it was 2004, I bought my first stallion. I had bred my first foal that I ever bred I bred a mare in 1998 where a breeder that had passed away left one of her really nice mares to my trainer with the intent that it was for my use. And I showed that mare for years, sent her off. That was the first mare I ever bred. I bred her to a stallion by the name of Far More Publicity. Tammy Bergen owned him up in the Sacramento area. And so she helped me along the way. I bought my first colt in 2004. He was an '03 baby, so I bought him as a yearling. And that was from Gold Hills Welsh. And again, Jackie and Gerald Verkyle that have that farm, they were really helpful. And we just came along that way. So I
Can I ask you?
just
Can I ask
happened
you
to
how
come
old
into
you
a
were?
breed.
Can I ask you
I
how
was
old you were?
15 the first year. Yeah,
That's
yeah. So
incredible.
I was 15 the first year that I bred. Yeah, so I was 15 years old. So 16 when I produced my first foal. And then
I
there
would
was
assume that
probably a couple more somewhere.
I would assume that
Mhm.
you had some adults around you though guiding you. It wasn't that you were, 15 or 16. You went, oh, I like this pretty pony. I'm just going to breed it and see what happens, right? I mean, there was a whole bunch of support and education leading up to that.
Um,
Oh God.
not as much as you would think. I kind of just did what I wanted to do, and I sounded like I knew what I was doing, and people just let me do it.
Well,
Um, so there was support in the building of foaling stalls and buildings of barn and financial. Actual hands-on, it was me.
wow,
And
that's incredible.
yeah, and that was okay. Back then you had to pick up a book to do research. The internet was around, obviously, but not everything was at your fingertips like it is today. So blessed is the broodmares and blessed are the foals were your primary sources of literature back then. And I think I read both 300 times.
Well, I think there's the good point, right, you're making is that, someone I think could listen to this or see this and go, oh, well, I'm 15. I like this pretty pony. I'm just going to breed it. And
Mhm.
that isn't it. It's sure, but you
No,
still have to do your homework, right? You have to go through the research in terms of
right.
educating yourself on what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. And so, because I think
Well,
that's
and,
what
and
really
that
comes into it.
really on that point specifically, when people come to me and say they want to breed said mare, this, that, or this is what they want to do, I always ask, what's your purpose? What's your goal? What's your purpose? What are you trying to achieve?
Right.
And there has to be, there's always, I'm like, okay, once we establish goal, purpose, and what are you trying to achieve? What's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Where are you going with this? What is your lifelong end goal with it? And that can be very different for every person. If they're looking to produce one foal, I want to go through this experience. I want to try this. I want to start from the ground up. Those are all wonderful reasons to breed, but my warning every time is here's the financial, you're going to jump in the deep end financially. You need to guard your heart because breeding is not for the faint of heart. And there are a lot of things that can go
Yes,
wrong no matter how good you are.
absolutely.
It is not a matter of if, but when disaster can and does and will strike.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Absolutely.
So, but yeah,
And
to that point, it's always what's your goal? What's your purpose?
hmm that's awesome. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a huge thing. I think that sometimes gets lost in the horse world is stopping amateurs or a clientele base and saying just that. Great, you want to do this, but what's your why? Right? Like, what is your why and what
What's
is
your
your plan?
why?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Did you
Yeah.
did you
And
ever
then you
study
really have to
equine?
be, Mhm.
Oh, just go ahead.
Oh no, and you really do have to also factor in not only what is your goal, what is your purpose, what are you dealing with, what can you house, and what can you handle?
Right. And what are you going to give back? What do you have to give?
Right.
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 So, what are
Yeah,
you just doing
exactly.
this because you want it, or are you doing it because once the process occurs, you know,
Yeah,
you've
you
got a
can't
little
undo
one.
it.
Yeah, there's
Mhm.
no, I
Can't give
mean,
back.
yeah, you can't put it back, right?
Uh-uh.
Once the genie's out of the box, right? So,
Oh yeah,
what is it you're
for
going to
sure.
give to you? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Now,
Yep, yep.
did you do any study of equine genetics, or anything that in
Not
terms of that?
not formally, not in an educated classroom. Independently, individually, yes. And I that's my other little crazy superpower is I'm really, really good at picking young stock. I can't tell you how I do it. I can't tell you exactly what the formula is because there isn't one, but if a foal excites me, it's going to be great. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to excite me its whole lifetime.
Yeah,
Um, and if they don't excite me, it's not that they aren't totally quality and I, don't have a wonderful purpose, but they're not going to be that it factor. And
right.
so I have a really good power at picking that. And then in doing so, it kind of, most people have to wait for that animal to fully mature to evaluate that cross. And I don't as much. And so I can make faster adjustments. And one of the biggest lessons you can ever learn in breeding is that just because something is an exemplary, checks every box, holy crap, amazing animal, does not mean that they are an amazing producer.
Yep.
And that is kind of the unfortunate and luck of the draw a little bit with breeding. And the trick is to be immersed in it long enough or get involved with somebody that has been immersed in it long enough to know within that breed how to cross, because you're never breeding two animals together, you're breeding four grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And you better like all four of them because you can absolutely get one of them or any combination thereof.
Yeah.
And they need to be of similar characteristics, build, and what you're looking for, because they say for every four foals a mare produces, one will be exemplary, one will be less than the others, and two will be in between, an average. And that I have really found to hold true.
Mm-hmm.
And crazy enough, you can take full siblings that one is the exemplary and one is the average, and they may not produce that way. Sometimes
Yeah.
some of my best producers are mares I would choose not to show because they have certain strengths that combine just right with someone else to make
Yeah.
what I would choose to show, but they're better served at home making the right animal.
I think that's such a
So,
good point, really, because so many people, I think, look at, oh, well, this grand champion, and then I'm just going to, breed it to this grand champion, and then I'm going to have a supreme grand champion. And you're like, that isn't how this works.
no.
That's
It
not how.
doesn't. It really is. I mean, I really am like every time you got to go back to that set of four above. So the two parents of the one you're breeding and the two parents of the other one you're breeding together, it's that four together and it obviously goes above that, but you can draw some pretty sharp correlations that do breed true just within that fourplex of animals.
That's I think that really kind of also goes back to, and obviously we're talking a lot about education today, but the quality
Mhm.
of stock that you produce, um, has so many different layers to what makes it quality, right? So it's
Right.
your eye and your experience, the education that you have, and the education and the extra steps you took to make sure you had the quote unquote book education as well. I think that because
Right.
there's not a lot of, not now, and there really wasn't back when we got started, any kind of real
Mm-mm.
platforms of academics.
No.
It really was just immerse yourself and learn as you go, you know? And so I
It,
think
it
there's a
really
lot,
was a learn by doing. Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot of credit due to you, honestly, because, and I didn't know this about you prior to this, that you took those extra steps as young as you were to make sure that you took the time to do the book work on top of it
Mm-hmm.
and put those together. But there's also,
Yeah.
there's a team aspect, I think, in horses and every aspect of the professional genres we're in. It isn't
Right.
just us, right? Me as a trainer, you as a breeder and a trainer, there's a whole support system, right? A support
Yeah.
professionals, right? So can you tell me a little bit
Right.
about that and the importance of your farrier and your vet and the relationship you have with them in terms of your breeding program?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a team, and I have a large one because I swear life takes an entire village. Um, and the from the very beginning with the young stock, especially, we'll start with the farrier. Those foals are born with long legs, shorter necks compared to their long legs because the way they grow, as you work from the hoof up, they stop growing incrementally as you work up the body. So they're born with extremely long legs because that's the first thing that stops growing, and the rest of the body keeps growing. And so they're a little bit disproportionate to maintain proper hoof health when it comes to how they eat their food off the ground. They foals are always right or left-handed. They always splay one leg in front of the other every time. And if you don't manage that, you will inevitably create lifelong hoof issues that are permanently set into the way the rest of their body grew above it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a maintenance factor with that and a management of how they're eating, how you're feeding them, because the horses really do have to eat off the ground for the structure of their jaw, but we actually feed them in the 4x4x4 produce bins so that they can't splay their legs as far,
Yeah.
and it really does help. And it's actually something I've discussed with Alex, primary farrier, of how we manage that, because we dealt with it a lot in the beginning. And when I started, he was having to start working on those foals, I mean, almost from birth. And when we brought in the produce bins and started feeding that way, it really got to where we could let their full hooves grow out a little bit and start managing them when there was more hoof to work with. And so, but it was a give and take. He and I went back and forth with it. It was a little bit of a trial and error, and we did really find it to work. And then
Full
management of
disclosure, full disclosure too, Alex is Alex Bruner of Gold Country Farrier. So there is that
yes,
disclosure. But yeah, I think the other point is people might think that, oh, okay, well, as soon as they're dropped, the farrier comes out and starts, you know, removing hoof, and that's not it at all, right? It's they start
that's
working
not
with
it at
you,
all.
yeah, just so
Yeah,
they can
and
get
because
used
the
to it
foals
and
are
live with the
born,
routine.
yep, and those foals are born with their full slippers that become a hoof cap.
Mm-hmm.
And that hoof cap, you can't work a ton with it, but you have to very carefully manage that it doesn't set the actual hoof growth to come in the wrong way. So it's these
Right.
tiny little adjustments, and foals have an attention span of a gnat, and they don't really like being caged in. And um I know this will sound a little crazy, but while we work with our foals, we do try not to overwork with them, because respect is easy to keep if there's just a hint of, fear's the wrong word, but um we'll just say respect.
Leadership,
They
right?
leadership. They have to, I mean, it's just like understanding a consequence in anything. This action gains this consequence. Um Foals grow up better if they are allowed to be foals. So it is that balance of, and not puppy dogs. It is that
Mhm.
balance of, we need to work with them, but we have to keep it short. So my ideal with foals is that my farrier shows up every 2 to 3 weeks, because then it's like, hey, we can get hands and a single rasp swipe across that hoof, and it was a good experience, and we knew when to quit, and their quarter runs out pretty quick.
Yep.
And the other problem that we really, you run into is the equine industry is predominantly made up of women, but the farrier and veterinary industry is often predominantly made up of men. And so that's the other thing, is you have to get all of these people around your young stock so that they don't have this instant development of, wait, you're not what I'm used to.
Right.
And
Good point. I didn't think about that, but that's a
mhm,
really good point.
yeah,
Yeah. If
yeah,
you're
no, we've definitely run into it. Yeah,
same
and I
thing
don't
with
know if it's more of a pony thing. Ponies are just a hair sharper and more discerning, and a little bit more of dragons. They very much so know their people, and
yeah.
so it's really nice when I can have that continuous introduction. And then onto the vets, we do have a plethora of amazing vets in this area. It's a really blessed location to be in. We have vets that special do straight repro only. And
Hmm.
when you specialize in something and only do that, you tend to be the top of your game. And so we have two of those in this county that's all they do. And they
Can you
all
name
work
them?
really well together. And mhm.
Do you feel comfortable naming who they are?
Oh yeah, so Dr. Melissa Patton and then Dr. Joy down in San Luis. I primarily use Melissa Patton in she's based out in Whitley Gardens, and she and Dr. Joy do a lot of, so Dr. Joy does all the ICSI, which I haven't stepped into. I just haven't wanted to pull that financial burden. And then Melissa does primarily the straight embryo flushes, where you breed the mare, flush the embryo, and then she does all repro work. They both do all regular repro work as well.
I
And
think that's
then
really
we
important,
also,
when we talk about, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's really important that I emphasize this point, because one of my main goals is to really educate the public and the equine public about the importance of specialities. So, when we talk
yeah,
about a vet, just like when we talk about, modern medicine, right? There are some vets that are great at general med overall. But then
yep,
there's a higher level almost where they specialize in these certain areas. And so if you're looking for something that's a
hmm,
specialization, going to your general ed, or med, excuse me, isn't
right,
necessarily where you're going to get the
isn't.
best results, right? We don't go to a if we have
No, it's
a
not.
problem with the brain, we don't go to a podiatrist. Well, you guys both went to med school, so I'm sure you could figure out what's wrong with my head. Like, that's not we don't do that.
Exactly.
So it's important, I
Yeah.
think, in the
And
that we really see that.
yeah, and like this area, we specifically have two repro vets. That's all they do. We specifically have one lameness vet. That's all he does. And then we have a number of vets that are more that general practitioner. Steve McClenny,
Mhm.
Stacy Potter. Those are the two, that I've used that,
That
they're
are
good
excellent.
for everything. Yeah, they're excellent. They're amazing vets. But when I have definitely my recommendation to everyone always, if you're going to breed a mare, I always say find the best repro vet you can get your hands on and send your mare there. Pay their shoot fee, let them handle it.
Yep.
Um, that's something that's newer to the industry, is a shoot fee. And I asked Melissa years ago, where did this shoot fee come from? Why do vets do it? And she said, I can tell you exactly why. She said, because I do not want my clients to tell me how much I can and cannot do. She said, I want to, they sent their mare to me to get it pregnant. I want to have the leeway to do every single, as look as many times. She said, if I need to ultrasound that mare 3 times a day, I don't want to be told I don't want to pay for that. She's like, that
Right.
is the minimum of what I feel I need to do to hit the end goal of your mare is bred. She said,
Right.
so I have some mares that I can look at once a day, some mares I can look at every other day, some mares that I'm going to be looking at 3 times a day. And
They're
she
all
said the
different.
beauty of the shoot fee, yeah, and she said the beauty of the shoot fee is it's all inclusive. It gives her the power to just do whatever it is she feels is necessary in how much she's looking to get her timing just right.
Well, and I would go so far also as it gives her the leeway to ensure that that's done safely, right? And if there an issue
Yep.
or anything comes up, she doesn't have to wait to call and then get clearance and make
Yep.
sure it's okay. She can just
Yep.
act, do everything that she
Yep.
knows how to do to the best of her ability, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's where that shoot fee came in. And I know there's a hair, I mean, I want to say Melissa's at 750 for a shoot fee. It covers 2 full cycles for shipped semen. So when you
Okay.
really break it down to 50 to $70 an ultrasound, but it really is a deal,
Yeah.
and it lets her just accomplish her end goal to the best of her needs and abilities.
It lets her do her job, right? And I think that's
Yeah,
something
it lets her
that,
do her job. Yeah,
yeah, well, all of us struggle with sometimes is that, we have these restrictions on whatever it may be. And that's a, topic for a different day, but, we have restrictions
yeah,
on elements sometimes that don't allow us to really do our job. Right. And so that sounds to me
right.
like she's just doing a blanket, like, just, you brought this horse to me. Let me
Yep.
do my job. I got you.
Let
You
me
know what
do
I
my
mean? And
job.
so,
And vets have all moved primarily to that are repro vets, and I think it's one of the best things that's happened in the industry. I
I
mean,
agree.
I will say standing stallions shipping semen to mares, my least favorite mare owner is the one that does everything at home with a vet coming every other day in the field. I mean, luckily our stallions have really good semen. It's you don't have to have perfect timing. It's going to stay alive. It's going to get the job done. But lordy, lordy, sometimes it amazes me that we are as successful as we are with. um,
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes
how
I'm
do you,
like, what do you mean you don't have a syringe?
turkey baster? So
It,
what is so we talked about that, the new shoot fee. How do you stay up to
right.
date with the latest advancements, excuse me, in equine breeding and genetics? And more importantly, how do you determine the validity of these quote unquote advancements? Are they legit, or, is it just a new quote unquote craze?
Well, kind of the unique thing about the breeding world is you have a pretty immediate response or lack thereof. So we don't really get too many unsuccessful crazes because they don't result in a positive pregnancy. And, it's a pretty quick turnaround. Mare cycles 21 days unless you alter it, which primarily we do, but their maximum kind of general cycle length is 21 days from one heat cycle to starting the next.
Mhm.
We're preg checking them at 14 days. If you're flushing embryos at 6 to 8 days, kind of a deal. So you have a pretty quick turnaround and you're either successful or not successful. So
Yeah.
we don't see a lot of crazy crazes coming through because if it works, it works. And by and large, you'll find everyone involved wants to do the least invasive procedures possible, least amount of expense possible with the most positive outcome. And so you kind of go through those steps of like, well, do we need to treat this mare's uterus? Yes. Well, can we just do a round of antibiotics? Let's start there. Can we, that we weren't successful there. Let's go ahead and throw a DMSO lavage in or two, just pull that inflammation down. And depending on what breed you're working with, there are other drugs available to you. Welsh ponies, we have to be very careful with steroids because ponies are metabolically compromised just as part of their genetic makeup.
Right.
And so, like your average horse mare that has good feet, you can give that mare Dex. and knock the inflammation right out of her uterus, no problem. Because with all the advancements in artificial insemination, everything else, now we're extending semen and we're putting additional items into that mare's uterus that she's being exposed to. And just like you can have an allergic reaction on your skin to a
Yeah.
product it doesn't like, mares have that reaction in their uterus. And especially when you move over to frozen semen, the buffers that are used and just the freezing process, it's very common to have an inflammatory response. So with ponies, we have to kind of skirt that issue and manage it the hard way of going with more DMSO thrown into their uterus, either in a lavage or an infusion, to knock that inflammation out when necessary. But to kind of get back to your question, we don't have to deal with that as much in breeding. It's not like training where there's all these fads that do harm, but somebody was successful with it.
Yeah.
We don't run into that as much. As far as staying on top of the industry, as it transitions and grows, that's where I just really point you right back to that vet that's a specialist.
Right.
And it was kind of funny. I don't remember, it was last year or the year before. I was standing at Melissa's and she was putting some oxytocin in one of her lavages, and she looked at me and she goes, "You already do this, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've done it for 20 years." Yes, I've been putting, that particular drug in my lavages. And she goes, "Dang it. They just came out with it. This is really beneficial out of Colorado." And she goes, and I thought to myself, I bet Megan already does that, because the woman that taught me everything that I do know, that got me my start in my base, she was just a pioneer in the field. She was originally by UC Davis. She then moved to Santa Cruz, then down here kind of in her retirement. And when UC Davis got started with their reproduction stuff, that was when she was in the height of it.
Oh,
And so she had a lot of crazy little tricks up her sleeve that just weren't what was being done medically. And
right.
it really worked.
Yeah.
And so Melissa was like, "Dang it. I knew you probably already did this." I'm like, "Oh yeah, why would you not put we give them oxytocin IM, but why would you not put it in their uterus? It works the same. It makes it push that fluid back out." So it's
Right.
kind of funny. Sometimes you really find a lot of those industry. I really do think what drives it is people willing to take a chance and try something that makes sense, and
Right.
it works and it catches on, and then it makes it to the schools, and and they're working on their cutting edge stuff too. But it really is just innovation of, this probably would work. Let's try it.
I think that's another good point in this industry to bring up too, is that it does take very brave people to do that,
Hmm.
because there is a lot of fear associated, I think, in the horse world, quote unquote, of trying something new and
Hmm.
having it end up badly and then detrimental to the horse. So we
Yeah.
do all the research we can, and then there has to be this moment where we go, "Hey, look, everything on paper pencils out. We're
Right.
going to give it a go," and that's scary for a
Mhm.
lot of people. But I think that
It
that's
is. It really is.
but when you do that, and you have those people that make those movements, right, then they do it. They're brave and they go, "I know this is going to work. I've done my research and I'm doing it." um that's what paves the way.
Yeah.
But I also think that that also creates slow transformation, right, slow advancements in the horse world, because people are hesitant
It
to
really
be
does.
that person to stick their
And
neck out and be like, "I'm doing it."
well, and really, you could apply that to the veterinary field, on top of not only are the owners that way and the whole, everyone wanting, having to take that risk and jump, but the vets too. It's funny, I'm surrounded by vets that are cutting edge. They stay on top of the articles, they stay on top of, the new research, they stay on top of all the new trends, so that they can implement that cutting edge as, different trials show, prove, the quality of this procedure. But then you go deal with the vets across the country, and I'm like, "Well, why aren't you just doing this?" And they're like, "Well, I've never done that." And they're afraid to do it because they've never done it that way.
Right.
And usually I can convince them to do it that way, and then their mare gets bred, and it's fine. I don't have to deal with them anymore. And so, but they learn something too.
Right. Right.
um,
So,
yeah, but it really is twofold, double edged. It really does come from every direction, including the professionals have to deal with that.
right. Right. What what is it when we talk about these different advancements and kind of taking that jump, um what are you seeing like over the span of your career? What have you seen in terms of, breeding characteristics that professional breeders in general focus on and kind of in within that tone of taking the jump into something new or different?
So the real shift in, because can speak best obviously to the Welsh breed, the real shift in the Welsh breed when I first got started with it, everything was pretty much domestically bred. Obviously, the ponies came from the UK at some point because they all did. They were imported over to to America. And I mean, you can trace everything back to UK bloodlines, but we hit a point where it's like, all right, these genetics have been here long enough. We're going to call them domestic bred. And so, right about the time I was a young adult, when people started, especially on the West Coast, it really did start on the West Coast for the whole country with the section that I'm in, because the Welsh breed has 4 sections, and I am primarily section Bs. So there have always been A's that were imported and a couple Cobbs that were imported. More so, they didn't have quite as much of that domestic feel to them, where the Bs really are the most popular in terms of numbers. They are the riding pony. They're the most universal, and have the most use outside of the Welsh world. So that just creates their popularity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the whole supply demand, the demand's there, the supply was created. So they really were the ones that became more domestic because they were here longer in larger numbers and bred that way. And right about the time somebody on the West Coast, I think Tammy Bergen kind of started it. She imported a stallion from the UK, and she went through the expense of importing an actual adult stallion, which is a much larger undertaking, but he could hit the ground running,
Mm-hmm.
as far as he was immediately producing foals and so on and so forth. And that's where, and then multiple other breeders followed suit. And another breeder up in the Northwest, she imported a lot of ponies. She didn't have a great eye for picking them, so she just imported a mass quantity and got lucky on some of
Wow.
them.
Wow.
But they were
Thank
all,
you.
I mean, they were all nice ponies, but
Right.
some were great and some were not. But
Right.
she got it right a number of times, and she did something very unique. And that's where the import pony, they're a very different look. So in the UK, they don't really, up until very recently, like a year ago, there was no such thing as a halter pony that was ridden and won. You didn't do both. You were
Really?
breed ring or you were performance ring. And I think
Okay.
last year was the first time a section B won in the performance ring and won in the breed ring at a big show.
Wow.
They're still very segregated over there, where the
Do you,
US has never been segregated.
why do
Um,
you think that happened over in the UK? Like, why do you think that owner made that choice to say, I'm breaking through. I'm
so
jumping.
I'm actually friends with her. She's a lovely gal. She's younger and she has just phenomenal ponies. And she just took a chance. And funny enough, she won. So the riding stuff was first. She won that day, and she really sat there and thought about pulling him from the halter ring the next day
Really?
because it wasn't done. You couldn't win both. I mean, that's just not how it's done. And she sat and oscillated on it for a long time to pull him out because, as far as she was concerned, it was kind of handwriting was on the wall because he won in the performance ring. That wasn't going to happen again the next day, and it did. So they're growing over there. We've never done that. So that's where it's very unique over here. And I think what kind of saves our breed and preserves it to never follow too many fad trends is every pony over here is generally an all around. It does everything. And that's
Mm.
expected. There's really no such thing as one that just does one set of performance. They show in the breed ring, they show in English, they show in hunters, they show in trail, they show in Western, they do the kids classes, they do the driving. Not that the same pony does absolutely everything, but there's not very many ponies that only do one thing. In fact, I can't think of a single one. And
Oh,
I
interesting.
know, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a single Welsh pony in the US that does one thing and one thing only. And
That's
that is
interesting
very
about the
unique.
Welsh. Yeah, very unique because even, in
Very unique.
sport horses, I mean, we have the show
Right.
jumpers, we have the dressage
Yep.
horses, we have the
Yep.
reiners. No, we
Yep.
don't.
All of
Um,
ours do it all.
yeah, that's
And so
cool.
that really does stop. So in the US, we originally had purebreds, ABCs and Ds, and then we've always had a half Welsh registry. Now the half Welsh registry is not in the stud book because they are not purebreds. But during my time on the board, we've also brought in partbreds. So a partbred has to have one, yeah, one. So it could be, you could take a half Welsh, you could breed it to a non-Welsh, and you would end up with a partbred. And so they're a quarter Welsh. And it took 20 years. People wanted this for 20 years, and it really did take that long to get it because the primary argument against it was, well, people are going to start breeding for one discipline, and that is not good for the breed. So it really is that whole all around thing is so staunchly in the aspect of the Welsh pony breed that it prevented for 20 plus years of arguing partbreds from being allowed into the registry because people were so afraid that that would happen. And I was one of the directors that voted for partbreds to be included. And thus far, it has not happened. Now, we haven't gone through enough time to say it would never happen because you never say never. But I really don't think that it will, because there's such an emphasis on that all around animal.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
just to kind of switch, not totally switch gears, but what is your opinion on the ethical implications of different breeds, and different genres, um, of breeding horses for specific traits, such as conformation extremes?
Yeah. So, I
That's
mean,
a
that really
question.
does
Yeah,
tie right into this question for sure.
yeah,
It has never served a breed well. Um, it, it just really hasn't. You can never say, oh, you focus so much on this one trait, fast forward 50 years and say, yeah, that really helped that breed out. I mean, you really, you're never,
right,
in my opinion, you're never ever going to say that. There's
right,
always that, I mean, it's just the laws of nature. You can't gain something without losing something. There's a yin to a yang. There's always a cost to
right.
everything that you gain. You lost something somewhere. And so that is kind of ties right back into that all around. For an animal to be good at all things, they can't be too extreme in any direction or they epically fail somewhere.
Right.
And so I do think that that's an excellent balancing check on the breed. Not to say that focusing on the jumper ring versus focusing on the hunter ring is in any way doing damage to what you're producing, because there are a lot of things just because they're focused on one ring versus the other, they're still jumping over a jump.
A lot of similarities.
They're
Yeah.
not, there's a lot of similarities, and you're going to usually find, the balance within that. And obviously, some things are more suited for one thing versus the other, your English pleasure versus your Western pleasure. Ours do both, but I will say, even within my own program, I have ones that I'm like, I don't want to ride that one. Western has way too much suspension. That's going to hurt my neck.
Right.
No, thank you. Um,
Yeah. There's a
but
chiropractor.
yeah, exactly. I keep my acupuncturist. I'm probably putting one of our kids through
Speed
school.
dial.
Um, but yeah, so by and large, it never benefits a breed in the long run, or a discipline in the long run to focus on one singular trait, because it just, you have to give up something somewhere else. And you really do actually see that in those UK ponies that are halter ponies. They have the most beautiful front ends. And then they kind of forgot there was a pony behind the withers, because it's not as important. They're not riding it. It
Right.
doesn't have to have that ability
Jump
to handle a job its whole life and stay sound.
right. Right.
So
Yeah.
there is a balance there. And one breeder in the Northwest importing a bunch of ponies, she accidentally, I'm not giving her credit for this, she accidentally got it right. She imported ponies from a more performance-based UK stud, and she imported other ponies from more of a halter-based UK stud. And then she mixed the two together, and I really don't think she knew what she could accomplish. And I saw it for what it was capable of doing. And again, back to that baby picker eye, I picked out the best foal she produced anywhere in that grouping, and I snatched him up. And I don't think she ever fully flushed out, because she wasn't a trainer, she was just a breeder. I don't think she ever fully flushed out the potential she had sitting in her program, but I
Uh,
picked that stick up and I ran with it.
oh
Um,
yeah, no, this one. I don't think you want this one. You don't want this one. I'm going to take
yeah,
this one.
give me that one. Yeah, and so that's where the stallion that I have today, that my entire program is based on now. And and to give credit, I had a stallion before, from a California breeder, and he was a phenomenal pony. I mean, that stallion walked on water, and I have never worked with a better animal. I have
Is that Mo?
never. That was Mo. Gold Hill's Most Wanted. I mean, they're really just, you can't best him. He was just one of the most amazing ponies I ever worked with. That animal gave 200% every time. He was extremely well put together, extremely good mover. I mean, he checked every box there ever was to check, except for one box.
Every horse comes with a story. The question is, what part of that story do you want to be? Now, this is where I say hit the subscribe button. And if you have any topics you want us to cover, or respected professionals in your area you would like us to reach out to, email us at equisamare@gmail.com. EQUISAMARE @gmail. See you next time.